The first thing I noticed was the silence, unnatural, deafening, suffocating. Max was gone. I stood frozen in the middle of the road, my breath coming in short gasps. The streetlights flickered above me, casting eerie shadows that stretched and twisted like unseen hands reaching for me. The asphalt beneath me was wet, not with rain but with something darker, something thicker. Blood. My hands trembled as I touched my temple, feeling the warm, sticky substance smear across my fingers. The pounding in my head made it hard to think, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't an accident. Max. My voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. Then I heard it, a whisper, a voice right behind me. He told you too much. A shiver ran down my spine. My legs refused to move. My eyes darted around, searching for Max, for help, for anything that made sense. But there was nothing. Only the flickering streetlights, and the echo of my own heartbeat, and then run Max's voice, not a bark, not a growl, words spoken clear and terrified. My blood ran cold. Before I could turn, before I could even scream, something grabbed me from behind. Darkness swallowed everything. And then there was nothing. If someone had told me a week ago that my dog would start talking, I would have laughed in their face. But now I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind or if something much, much worse was happening. 7 days ago, Max was just a normal dog, or at least I thought he was. A golden retriever with a goofy smile, endless energy, and a habit of stealing socks when I wasn't looking. He had been with me for 5 years, ever since I adopted him from a shelter. We had our routine: morning jogs, afternoon naps, night walks. Life was simple, predictable, until the accident. It happened so fast. One moment we were crossing the street, near my house. The next, a car came out of nowhere. I barely had time to react before the tires screeched, the headlights blinded me, and Max, he jumped straight in front of me. The impact sent him flying. He hit the pavement hard, a sickening thud that made my stomach lurch. I ran to him, heart pounding. "Max! Max! Stay with me, buddy!" His body twitched. Blood pooled beneath his fur, but his eyes, his deep golden brown eyes, stared into, mine. Then he did something that froze me to my core. His mouth opened and he spoke. "Don't trust them." My mind refused to process it. I must have imagined it. The shock, the fear, it was playing tricks on me. But then, he did it again. "They're coming." My breath hitched. My hands shook. I wanted to believe I had misheard, that my brain was filling in the gaps with nonsense. But the way Max looked at me, terrified, desperate, told me otherwise. Then his body went still. "No, no, no, stay with me," I shouted, shaking him. People were gathering. Someone was calling an ambulance. But I didn't care. All I cared about was Max, and the fact that, for a brief, impossible moment, he had spoken. But that was only the beginning. Max survived. Barely. The vet called it a miracle. Honestly, with injuries like these, I don't know how he pulled through, she said, shaking her head. "But he's stable now. Give him rest. He'll need time to recover." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside my mind was racing, because I heard what I heard. I didn't tell anyone, not the vet, not my friends, not even myself, really. I kept trying to convince myself that I had imagined it, that Max had been whimpering, in pain, and my brain had twisted the sounds into words. It was the only explanation that made sense, until that night. The first word. I woke up to the feeling of something heavy pressing against my chest. Warm fur, steady breathing. Max. He was lying on me, his head resting near my shoulder, something he hadn't done in years. Normally, he slept in his dog bed by the door. "Max," I mumbled, still half asleep. Then, "Wake up." I bolted upright. My heart nearly stopped. The voice had been low, raspy, urgent, and it came from right beside me. I turned to Max. He stared at me, his eyes unusually intense, glowing faintly in the dark. My stomach twisted. "What did you just say?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Silence. Max didn't move, didn't bark, didn't do anything except stare. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe my exhaustion was messing with my mind. But then he licked my hand and said, "One more word, listen." I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly tripped over myself. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I pressed my back against the wall. "This isn't real," I muttered. "Dogs don't talk. This isn't happening." But Max just sat there on the bed watching me, like he was waiting. Something was wrong. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat there watching Max as he watched me. He didn't say anything else, but something about him felt off. The next morning, I convinced myself I was losing it. Lack of sleep, stress, the trauma of nearly losing Max. But as the days passed, I started noticing things. Max wouldn't bark anymore, not at the mailman, not at squirrels, not even when a stranger passed by the house. He just watched. He wouldn't eat his food unless I was in the room. It was like he was waiting for me. He stopped playing with his toys. Instead, he would sit near the door, ears twitching, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, 3 nights later, I woke up again. Max wasn't on my bed. He was sitting by the window, staring outside. His back was stiff, his fur bristled. I swallowed hard and walked over. "Max, what are you looking at?" He didn't move. I followed his gaze. And then I saw them, across the street, standing completely still under the flickering streetlight. 2 people, or at least, I thought they were people. But something was wrong with them. Their faces. They were too smooth, too pale, too identical. And they were staring directly at my house. A chill crawled up my spine. My hands clenched into fists. "Who are they?" I whispered. Max didn't answer, but he didn't have to, because at that exact moment, both figures tilted their heads in unison and smiled. Max growled, low, deep, dangerous. And then he spoke again. "Don't let them in." I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. Don't let them in. My body screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the 2 figures under the streetlight. Their smiles never faltered. Their heads remained tilted at the exact same angle, and worst of all, they didn't blink. Max let out another low growl, his hackles raised. His body was tense, ready to pounce, but he didn't charge. He just waited, as if he knew something I didn't. Then tap, tap, tap. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house, from my front door. My stomach twisted into knots. My pulse pounded in my ears. No, no, no. No, they were outside. There was no way they could be at my door already, right? Max turned his head toward the sound, his ears flattening against his skull. Another knock. "Don't open it." His voice was barely a whisper this time, but it sent ice through my veins. I swallowed hard, stepping backward toward my bedroom door. My phone. I needed my phone. I needed to call someone. Then, bang, 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 I nearly screamed. The knocking had turned into pounding, hard, desperate, wrong, and then a voice. "Let us in." "We saw your dog get hurt. We just want to help." I shuddered. Their voices were too smooth, too identical. I forced my shaking legs to move, grabbing my phone off the nightstand. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I dialed 911. The call didn't go through, no service. My blood ran cold. That wasn't possible. The pounding at the door stopped. Silence. Then the voice returned. But this time, it was different. It was mine. "Hey, open up. It's me." My whole body stiffened. My vision blurred for a second. No, that's impossible. I looked down at Max. His ears were flat against his head, his body tense. I knew deep down that whatever was outside wasn't me. Then click, I gasped. The front door had just unlocked. On its own, I ran, straight for the door, straight for the lock, straight for whatever was about to come inside. But before I could reach it, the door swung. Open darkness, a rush of cold air. And standing there in the doorway was me. My own face, my own clothes, my own expression. But the eyes weren't mine. They were black, empty, and smiling. Max lunged, his body a blur of golden fur and bared teeth. But the thing in the doorway didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't move until it smiled wider, and then it spoke. "Bad dog." A wave of pressure exploded through the room, a soundless force heavy and suffocating, like 1,000 hands pressing against my skin. Max yelped midair, stopped midair, frozen, suspended. His body twisted unnaturally, his limbs locked in place, as if held by invisible strings. His jaws snapped at nothing, his paws scrambling in empty air. I choked on a scream. I couldn't move, my feet felt glued to the floor, my hands trembling at my sides. The thing wearing my face tilted its head, just slightly, like it was studying me. Its black, soulless eyes never blinked. "Why are you afraid?" it asked in my voice. I gasped, trying to force my legs to move, to run. "Let him go," I rasped. It grinned, and then it blinked. Max dropped. He hit the ground with a pained whimper, scrambling to his feet, but he didn't run. He stood his ground. His fur bristled, his body shaking with silent rage. I wanted to grab him, to run, to get the hell out of this house. But then the thing stepped forward. Crossing the threshold, coming inside, I felt it enter. A shift in the air, a wrongness pressing against my skin. The temperature plummeted. My breath fogged in front of me. My heartbeat was a roar in my ears. Then it took another step, another, and as it did, something peeled away. My face. The skin on its cheeks rippled like melting wax, sliding, shifting, reforming, until I wasn't looking at myself anymore. I was looking at someone else, someone I knew. My breath hitched, my knees nearly buckled. It was my brother. Hadn't seen him in 5 years. Not since the accident, not since... I swallowed hard. He's dead. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But there he was, standing in my hallway, smiling. "Hey," he said, and I knew that this wasn't him, but my voice still broke when I whispered, "Noah?" A flicker of something crossed his face, and then he laughed. Low, mocking, not Noah's laugh, not even close. Max barked, loud, frantic, before shoving himself between me and the thing that wore my brother's face. The thing's grin snapped away. Its expression went blank. Then it took another step forward and whispered, "Why didn't you save me?" My stomach twisted, my throat closed. No, it was lying. It wasn't real. It wasn't him, but the guilt, the pain, the memories, they crashed into me anyway. And for the first time I thought, maybe I deserved this. Maybe I deserved whatever was about to happen. And maybe that's exactly what it wanted. Max wasn't barking anymore. He stood rigid, his tail stiff, his body shaking. But he didn't lunge, he didn't growl, because whatever this thing was, it didn't just look like Noah. It felt like him, and that was the most terrifying part. I took a shaky step back, my mind screaming, "Run, run, run," but my body, my heart, wanted to believe. Noah. I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "This isn't real. You're not real." He tilted his head. "Aren't I?" The words slithered down my spine like ice. I wanted to deny it. I needed to. But then he did something that shattered my breath. He reached out his hand, palm up, fingers curled, just slightly, the way he always did when we were kids, the way he used, to when he wanted me to follow him. My heart clenched. I could still remember the last time, that rainy night. The accident. Noah's body half crushed under metal and glass, his hand outstretched. Reaching for me, I never took it. I left him there. I ran. I sucked in a sharp breath, squeezing my eyes shut. "Stop," I whispered. "You left me," he said. Tears burned behind my eyelids. I didn't... My voice broke. I was scared. Noah's lips twitched. So was I. A single tear slipped down my cheek. I could still hear his screams from that night. The way he begged me not to leave him, and the worst part, I had. I had left him there, pinned beneath the wreckage, with rain pounding against my skin and his blood pooling at my feet. I had run. I had let fear win. And he had died. Alone. I opened. My eyes, Noah was closer. Too close, no, not Noah. The thing that wore him, I could see it now, the cracks. the places where his skin didn't quite fit. The way his shadow stretched too long against the floor, twisting at unnatural angles. This wasn't my brother, it never was. It was something else, something that fed on this, on my fear, on my guilt. My stomach twisted. I had been feeding it all. Along. That's why it looked like him. That's why it felt like him. That's why it was winning. It had found a home inside my regrets, inside my memories, inside me. And if I didn't stop it now, it would never leave. I had to let go. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my shaking hands. Then I stepped forward. Max barked, but I ignored him. The thing, Noah, blinked. "What are you—" I grabbed its hand, hard, and whispered, "You're not real." A flicker of something passed across its face. Confusion, shock, then rage. Its fingers locked around my wrist. The air cracked, the floor shook, the house groaned, and suddenly I wasn't standing anymore. I was falling, plummeting, into the dark, into the past. Back to the night of the accident. I hit the ground hard. The cold rain splashed against my skin, and the distant hum of traffic blurred in my ears. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then I heard it. The screaming. My stomach clenched as I turned my head. There, just a few feet away, was the wreckage, the crumpled metal, the shattered glass. And Noah, pinned beneath the twisted frame of the car, his face pale, his lips trembling. His eyes found mine. "Don't leave me," he whispered. My chest tightened. This was it. The moment I ran, I remembered the terror, the way my body locked up, the way I turned and— No, not this time. I pushed forward, my knees scraping against the asphalt as I crawled toward him. The rain blurred my vision, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't leave him again. I reached for his hand, my fingers wrapping around his. "I'm here," I choked out. "I won't run. This time, I promise." His grip tightened, and then he smiled, a slow, eerie smile, and whispered, "You should have." My blood ran cold. His hand burned against mine, too hot, too tight. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't. The world twisted. The shadows rippled, and suddenly I wasn't holding Noah's hand anymore. I was holding something else, something with claws, something that smiled with too many teeth, something that had been waiting for me all along. The ground cracked beneath me. The air turned to ice, and as I was dragged into the dark, I realized the truth. This wasn't a second chance. This was the trap, and I had just walked right into it. Darkness swallowed me whole. The world spun. My breath caught in my throat as the icy grip dragged me down. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, a frantic rhythm that matched my desperation. No, this wasn't how it ended. I kicked. I fought. My fingers clawed at the empty air, searching for anything, anyone. But there was only silence, only the void. And then a voice. Soft. Familiar. "You can still change this." A flicker of light, a faint warmth against my skin. The grip around my wrist loosened. I gasped, twisting my head. Noah. But not as I last saw him. No blood. No twisted wreckage. He stood before me, his form glowing in the shadows, his expression unreadable. I choked on my own breath. You have to wake up. Wake up!" A sudden force slammed into my chest. Pain, blinding, searing pain. I screamed, and then I was somewhere else. The hospital room was too bright. My eyes fluttered open, my throat dry as I tried to sit up. Pain shot through my body, forcing me back. Down the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled my ears. Confusion settled over me like a thick fog. Where was I? What happened? And then I saw him sitting at the edge of the bed. Max. His golden fur shimmered under the hospital lights, his dark eyes locked onto mine. He tilted his head, and then, in a voice only I could hear, "You came back." The memories hit me all at once. The accident, the wreckage, Noah's voice, the thing that had tried to take me. I sucked in a breath. I should have died, but I didn't. Max had brought me back. Somehow, someway, he had saved me. I reached out, my fingers tangling in his fur, and for the first time in forever, I believed in second chances, in the things we don't understand, and in the bond between a human and their dog. a bond that even death couldn't break. It's been 6 months since that night. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what tried to take me or why Max was the only one who could speak to me, but I know this. That night changed everything. Max still watches over me, still listens when I talk, and sometimes, late at night, I swear, I can hear Noah's voice in the wind, a whisper, a warning, or maybe just a goodbye.